Hey guys, it's Cal with the Irrigation and Lighting Doctor here on another episode of the Do-It-Yourself Lawn and Gardens Hacks podcast. I'm really excited about this episode because we're going to shift it up a bit. We've been talking about landscape lighting a bunch because that is the core of our business. We also run an irrigation company here in Calgary that we install residential and acreage irrigation systems around the city. But my background is in golf courses, and this episode is going to be about how to make your lawn look more like a golf course. And I've invited one of my friends that I've known for quite some time from the golf industry, who now deals on the agronomic side across Western Canada with homeowners, contractors, and golf courses, from everything from fertilizer to seed to irrigation. He's been in equipment. He's done it all. My good friend Nelson Decken. We're going to get into a bunch of different ways to make your lawn look more like a golf course, and I hope you guys enjoy this. We love getting your comments and feedback, so please be sure to send those to me. You can always email me and reach me directly at cal@lightingdoctor.ca, and I hope you guys enjoy this episode.
Welcome to Lawn and Garden Hacks, presented by the Irrigation and Lighting Doctor, where we share all the best time and money-saving tips, tools, and ideas for all you do-it-yourself weekend warriors who want to have the best-looking home and gardens on the block and be the envy of all your neighbors. Be sure to follow the Lighting Doctor on Facebook and YouTube for more amazing lawn and garden hacks, and leave your comments and questions. We love your feedback.
Okay, so first, maybe just a little background, like where you came in from and stuff. I kind of know a little bit, but what's your background? What do you do now, if you figured that out yet even?
So what I do now, Cal, is I manage agronomics for Site 1 in Western Canada. It's a fancy title for if anybody has seed or fertilizer questions or needs to kill plants, they ask me how to do it.
So that's what agronomics is?
That's what agronomics is. Seed, fertilizer, and chemistry.
Okay. And where was your background? Because I know you worked in California for a bit, or what's the story?
Yep, Northern Alberta boy. So started growing grass in Northern Alberta, and then you got tired of winter, moved to California, and eventually politics makes you move back. So I had a chance to grow grass across a couple different climactic zones and in different environments.
And golf courses?
Golf courses in particular, yeah.
And you've been in the golf industry for...
Too long. Yeah, don't tell anybody how long.
Well, and that's kind of why I wanted to interview you, because even with irrigation stuff, I always get the same question is, how do I get my lawn to look like a golf course, right? Which the answer is, they usually tell people, we'll go spend $500,000 on equipment and materials and labor, and no problem.
And you should be fine.
Yeah, and then you'll be fine. But we just talked about this, but so what's the number one question you get from most homeowners when it comes to lawn care? Or
it's almost always, how much fertilizer do I add?
Yeah.
People want to make their golf courses look like, or their lawn look like a golf course, but the number one question is how much fertilizer to add.
Right.
And while there's math answers, usually the right answer is match the number on the fertilizer bag to the number on the spreader, and you'll get the right rate, or close to the right rate.
Yeah.
I guess the second question I forgot is how often, or what's the frequency of fertilizer? And in our climate in Calgary, that's about 3 times a year. On 6 months growing season, for areas that are 12 months growing season, you just essentially double it. But yeah, about 3 times a year. How much? How often? Match the number to the bag on the spreader, and that'll be close enough.
So it usually tells you the writing on the bag is not just for shits and giggles. It actually tells you how much you should be putting down.
Believe it or not, there's instructions. There are instructions on the bag, and if you read them, it's right there.
Okay, so is there a difference? Because most people will go to Canadian Tire, Home Depot, or whatever and buy their fertilizer. What should they be looking for? There's 3 times a year. I mean, is there different things to apply at different times of the year? Or?
Yeah, that's a good one. Probably I'd recommend that you buy your fertilizer from somebody that sells fertilizer, not from a big box store. Big box stores will put spring fertilizer on a bag, but spring in the Pacific Northwest or Vancouver is different than spring in Saskatoon. So they're kind of stuck with marketing. It's probably best to buy it from a place that knows something about fertilizer, because everybody's climate is just a little bit different.
So we're in Calgary, obviously different everywhere. I put a plug in for you guys. Is that something that they would come to you guys for? Or is there different places like?
They can. certainly people could come to site one landscape supply. Any landscape supply company is probably the right place to buy fertilizer. You want to buy from an expert or somebody who's at least knowledgeable in the area. I think that'd be my advice.
So just search landscape supply company, and you probably find 10 companies that it's going to be a better fit than Canadian Tire and Home Depot.
Absolutely, just because their geography is so varied, right? They've got stores in so many different locations, right?
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. What do you see, the number one question, but what do you find that most homeowners, what's the biggest mistake they make?
Well, this could be its own podcast. Like, we could tell stories on this for hours. At least 4 or 5 times a year, we sell dye to contractors, so trained people that confuse non-selective herbicide with selective herbicide. So people try to spray dandelions, but they use essentially glyphosate or Roundup and kill everything. It happens 4 or 5 times a year. So that one's that always happens.
So don't spot treat your yard with Roundup.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
Okay.
Not so much anymore now that the pre-emergents are gone, but weed and feed.
Yeah.
People would spread weed and feed on their yard, and they would spray it into their planter beds, and it would kill all the plants like it was supposed to. So those just happens all the time. Probably, the people that spray Roundup on their grass, they deserve it. But the mixing of containers. So if you do spray Roundup, and then rinse out your container, but leave a little bit of Roundup in the nozzle and don't fully clean it, I always feel bad for those people, and that happens. It happens all the time. So you can paint it. That's all you can do is paint it or reseed. So
yeah, okay. So what's the stupidest thing you've ever done that you've learned your lessons from?
Oh boy. Well, I did the weed and feed, and I say people do weed and feed. That was actually me. Yeah.
So what did you do then?
I sprayed, this was 20 years ago, it was granular weed and feed, and I put it in my front yard, and I had just beautiful peonies at the time, and all the perennials, and they were like buggered for 2 years.
Oh, so you just blanketed
weed and feed.
Yeah. I don't have to weed my garden anymore. I'll just weed and feed it.
But it really hit the perennials. Yeah, it hit the perennials pretty hard. So
So I know we can't get it, but you can still get weed and feed at a lot of places in the States. So
yeah.
Keep it on the grass is what you're saying? Don't use it anywhere else.
Well, really, it's not registered in Canada anymore, so you can't buy it, and really shouldn't even bring it in because it's just too easy to make a mistake.
Yeah.
It's too easy to make a mistake with pre-emergence. So.
But how do you mean, like just applying too much? Or
Well, just not applying it properly. They can still use it in the U.S., but in Canada we've banned it, obviously, because of access to agriculture. People were spreading it on potatoes, and the herbicide was stinging at potatoes, so just don't do it.
Gotcha.
If you have a dandelion, spray it. If you have to. At the same time, it's a dandelion. You don't have to kill everything, but...
Yeah, but it looks better that way.
Everybody's got their own thing.
So is there, because I know we only have a few things available here, but like stuff like, what do you call it there?
The pendulum, the pre-emergence in the U.S.?
Even the stuff you'll buy at your big box stores that for selective.
Selective? There's lots.
I can't remember the names and stuff, but that stuff still works.
Kill-X.
If you're looking at
Kill-X is one of the big ones.
If you're looking at just spot treat, that stuff's fine. That'll work.
Absolutely.
Probably a better option than...
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it worked great. I'd probably... Honestly, if we could back up the bus a little, I'd probably say look at fertilizer, look at putting new seed down, look at managing your turf so you don't have to spray weeds.
Gotcha.
If you have a good irrigation system, if you have good, healthy plants, they'll choke the dandelions out on their own. So there's lots of ways.
Well, and I guess that kind of be my next question is what are a couple things that you tell homeowners to do, whether they're trying to choke out weeds or whatever, but just to get they're obviously they're not going to get their lawn to look like a golf course because we talked about that. It's just it's not realistic unless you're willing to cut your grass every single day and fertilize just continually.
Top dress.
Yep. It's not realistic. Yep. But if they want to, make it a little bit nicer, what are a couple things? And I like that you don't always have to just kill out the weeds. If you have a healthy lawn, it's going to do that on its own.
By the time you've got a dandelion or some sort of weed, there was about 4 or 5 things that happened in your turf to get there. And there's never just one answer. You can't just fertilize more and the turf will grow in. Fertilizing will help. Overseeding will help. Not doing crazy stuff in the winter. People, one of the things I see in our neighborhood all the time is people will shovel the snow off so their dogs have a spot, dirt or whatever else.
Dog piss isn't good for lawns. Is that
Well,
what you're saying?
I mean, I get it. The dog's got to piss somewhere, but if you shovel it off,
He pisses on your neighbor's lawn.
that's what you should do. But you've got an area that's going to have turf stress or desiccation. You're going to have weeds there in the spring.
Yeah.
So, managing in the fall, one of the things people do is they shave the turf right down. And, well, if you leave a little bit, there'll be a lot of, a little bit healthier turf. And it starts the year before. Having healthy turf in the fall leads to healthy turf in the spring, which will lead to fewer weeds. So you can reduce herbicide usage a lot by just managing all those different practices. Irrigation's a huge one. Huge one.
Well, and that's a good question too, because there's two trains of thought on that, and there's times and there's rhymes and reasons to it. But some people mow the shit out of their grass first, in the fall, so it's just bare bones, and some people leave it long. So why do they do both options, and when is one better than the other?
Well, if you only had a crystal ball, so if you're going to have lots of nice even snowfall and it's not going to get too cold without snowfall, yeah, you can shave it down. So the argument is always that in the spring there's the dead tissue invites disease. So when people see yellow, that disease and that stuff will rot and essentially compost on your grass in the spring. So composting will leave different types of bacteria that'll make fairy rings or mushrooms. So people don't want that, so they want to get rid of all that material that'll essentially horizontally compost in the spring. I don't like that personally. I think you're way better off leaving your grass tall, and I don't mean 4 inches. Regular mowing height.
You would regular mowing?
Yeah, regular mowing height. It'll trap some snow that'll insulate and really not allow for temperature fluctuations that'll allow for desiccation, drying out, or the other thing. I'm a huge believer in leaving your turf taller in the fall while it's growing. The length of the roots is directly related to the length of the top, and if you shave it down while it's still growing, the roots will shrink, and the roots is where all the energy is stored for the winter. So people that shave it down too early, one of the worst mistakes you can make.
Okay.
So leave it tall, which is 2 inches in the fall.
So that works for, I'd say, 70% of the people listening to this.
Yep.
Because you worked in California a little bit, any advice for people who maybe don't have to deal with, like 2 feet of snow like we've got right now? They're obviously dealing with different grasses too. I don't know what your experience is with,
cool season
Bermudas
grass
and stuff,
yeah.
and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they live in nice year all year round, so screw them.
You figure it out on their own.
Figure it on your own.
Fair enough. I like that.
Bermuda is a weed. I think those people are probably envious of us because cool season turf is so much nicer than Kikuyu or Bermuda. So
hey,
honestly,
that answer works for me.
Yeah.
You got the nice weather.
Screw you.
You got to deal with it.
Yeah, I hope your turf's shitty. Yeah.
Nice. So then I guess when it and you can circle this however you want, but what are some of the, I guess, biggest changes, advancements and stuff that you've either seen in the past 5 to 10 years or you see coming down the pipe? I mean, we talked about in Canada you don't have weed and feed anymore. I mean, that was a pretty big shocker for most people. I know technology's changing a lot of things too. The battery operated equipment, all that kind of stuff. What have you seen has kind of been the biggest shifts?
I think the 2 biggest changes are probably with the fertilizer and irrigation. So irrigation's changing. 10 years ago, you'd have a spray that was, spraying a gallon a minute, and you'd put them side by side, and if half the water went down the drain, whatever, because there was no issues with water. You just sprayed as much as you want. So now, obviously a lot of the irrigation companies are making efficient heads, where the distribution uniformity is way up. So we're getting the irrigators are getting water in the soil. It's way better than running it down. So that's a big change, is the smart use of water. Well,
and maybe elaborate on that, because that's one thing that we get a lot is people always say, you put in an irrigation system, you're wasting all this water. But then you see the bozo on the corner who's got one of the sprinklers that goes back and forth. He's watering half the street midday for 6 hours, right?
There's the whether it's more even distribution, whether it's sprinklers today that throw a third of what they did in the past. Soil is, I don't want to get too technical, but soil has thatch and can be hydrophobic. So if you're putting a gallon a minute down, it's very possible that most of it ran off. And everybody can probably imagine or relate to that there was a time when all the water, you see it sheeting down, the drain. Well, that's just pure waste. But, now the heads that are putting a third, the water gets a chance to go in. Controllers have cycle and soak, so you can water for 10 minutes, let it soak, and cycle again. So no doubt, just a social acceptance of smart watering is helping being way more efficient. Then I think the second or third one is the new fertilizers. Everything used to be sulfur-coated urea, and when it got water, it released. That was it. Well, if it rained an inch and released, it was done. Well, now the new fertilizers, all of some of the new coatings are all released on munchie bug activity. So a sulfur-coated urea, people would fertilize as soon as they could get outside in the spring. Really excited. You watch the Masters. That's green. My grass has got to be green, so you go fertilize. Well, the soil temperature could be 1, 2, 3, 4 degrees Celsius. And the plant doesn't need any nutrients. Well, it rains in the spring and it's gone. You wasted it all. But the new fertilizers are, they sort of release on biological activity. So when it's July and it's 30 Celsius or 80, 90 Fahrenheit, the munchie bugs in the soil are breaking it down, and then they're feeding the plants when the plants are growing the most and need it.
And munchie bugs, that's a technical.
That's a highly technical term for biological activity. That's huge. The biggest thing, actually, probably by far, is the new way of fertilizing.
Before you get into that, so that's probably good to your earlier point. That's why you don't. You're better off going and buying fertilizer from a landscape supplier than you are at the big box store, because they're still selling the old stuff that when it waters,
it's gone.
You're going to be cutting your grass like friggin' bonkers, right? Because there's no
even for 14 days.
It's just for 14 days you're going to have a good growing lawn, but after that you're done. So that's good point. That's why stay away from that as much as possible. Go get it from somebody who knows what they're doing. So
the second thing, it's probably the biggest thing, actually. I guess if I had to put my finger on one thing that's a change, is in the last 10 years we've changed from feeding the plant to feeding the soil. There was a time that you put down ammonium sulfate, or you put down quick release fertilizers, and they feed the plant instantly. But now you're seeing a shift to like a perfect blend organic or Malorganite organic, where you feed the soil and let the soil break down and feed the plant. So there's a huge philosophy shift, on organics, on liquids, on worm compost that are feeding the soil instead of the plant. And I think that's actually completely right. People don't get an immediately green response right away, but feeding the soil instead of feeding the plants using compost teas is probably the right way.
And just everybody shifting into more of that, environmentally friendly and all that. And they think that all fertilizer and all irrigation and stuff is bad, but they don't realize, a lot of the things you're talking about. I mean, irrigation is not what it used to be. It's way, way more efficient, and usually a lot more efficient than the bozo on the corner just watering the road. The fertilizers are so much better, so much more efficient than they used to be, so that there's not as much just running into the sewer systems and all that. And I think especially, both having golf course backgrounds, you realize that more because you're put under a lot more scrutiny than most homeowners. So the organics and the feeding the soil instead of just feeding the plant is really going to be the future, hands down. And that's right. It's the right thing to do. The example from golf is golf sprays fungicide every fall so they don't get fairings, then grass doesn't die throughout the winter. We talked about on the mowing height. Well, in New Zealand and Australia, they banned fungicides, and everybody thought this is the end of the world. But it turns out 3 or 4 years now, the soils have basically adapted and reached a state where it's natural, and there is no issues with fungicide anymore. So that'll be coming, and it's probably right. Cool.
Yep. Worm compost, there's something to it.
So is there, what I always tell people, if you want your lawn to look like a golf course, I mean, we both came from the golf course industry. We don't want to give up all our secrets, but the reality is grass grows all by its own. If you water it and you feed it and you cut it, is probably your best bet. So if you're looking for the idiot answers or the easiest way, just take care of your lawn. But is there something out there? Is there whether it's a tool, a piece of equipment, a product, or something that you think everybody should have, or would make such a difference?
Yes. Hands down, a knife. So we hear, this is amazing, it's actually is homeowners or contractors, and they'll come in and they'll say, we planted this tree a year ago, and the pine needles have completely killed the grass underneath it because they're acidic. And they've researched in the internet, and they need gypsum or something. But You can't tell if your soil is dry or not by looking at it. So we get homeowners and contractors that'll drive by a property and they'll say, oh, it's too wet or it's too dry. The number one thing people need is a knife or a soil probe. Golf course will use a soil probe, but it costs $40. So just use a knife, look at the soil.
And you can tell.
You can tell. Cut a little section out, squeeze the soil. If water comes out of it when you squeeze it, it's too wet. If it squeezes into a ball, it's probably about right. And if it's powder, it's too dry.
Yeah.
You could spend $1,000 on a Spectrum soil probe, the golf does, but that's really what it comes down to is you need to look at the soil. You can't tell by looking at it whether it's too dry.
Right.
There's insects that were eating the roots of plants in Mackenzie Lake area, and people just turn up the water. Well, actually, if you took a sample and looked, you'd see that there was grubs or cinch bugs all over. So get a probe, get a knife, and just look at the soil. And under trees, in 2 years, it doesn't acidify. It's the fact that tree is taking all the water.
Yeah.
And if you go grab the soil, you'll see what I mean.
It's just soaking wet.
Yeah. Just water it.
Cool. Well, that might answer the last question I had, too, is, if you could only give a homeowner or contractor just one simple piece of advice to make their life a little easier, to get their lawn, their yard, whatever it is, a little bit better, what's the one thing you would probably tell people?
Overseed.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be it by far. Without getting too technical, that we can have your lawn is never one species. It's a couple different types, and each one has advantages and disadvantages. And you're not going to see golf course type turf out where there's no irrigation. And there's a relationship between all the different species. If you can overseed, it'll hide all the mistakes you made. Let's say if it is an irrigated property, you went on vacation 2 years ago and the sprinklers didn't work for 3 weeks while you were gone, you probably lost all of your nice turf, which is the Kentucky bluegrass. If you're, how far do you go? People look at a thin-bladed turf and they're like, my lawn is thin. I'm going to fertilize it more and I'm going to water it. Well, that's not going to make it thicker. That if you look at it with a trained eye, that means that the fescue has taken over, and fescue is just thin. That's how it is. Grass is not like humans. If you and I eat a whole bunch of hamburgers, I guess I shouldn't pick on McDonald's, but if we eat McDonald's, we're going to get fat. It's how it works. Well, grass is not that way. If you feed it more, it doesn't get fatter. If you want thick turf like golf courses, you have to get Kentucky bluegrass in, which is a thicker bladed turf. It needs water all the time. Golf courses water every night. So if you don't have irrigation, it's a classic. I don't have irrigation, but I want my place to look like a golf course.
Yeah.
Well, they water every night. You can't. It doesn't work that way. So overseeding would be the best, because then you get back the nicest species. And even in the last 10 years, there's some of the newer varieties are just darker. You can have a darker lawn by overseeding without even having to fertilize. So overseed.
So if somebody doesn't know the difference between the different grasses, is there like a kind of a consistent blend or something that you would say, if you overseed with this, and we'll talk cool season grasses
yes.
here, what would that be?
So we've got one, it's a sun and shade mix, and it's a 50-50 blend between fescue and bluegrass, because homeowners and contractors are all bullshitters. They say that I'm going to water every night, or they say I fertilize 3 times a year. They say, but they never do. The guys that say I water a lot. Well, what's a lot? I water once every 2 weeks. That's a lot. So it's a blend that's 50-50, and it will respond to how you treat it. If you don't water, the fescue is going to take over. Your lawn will be thin, because that's Mother Nature's defense. If you water every night, the bluegrass will take over. So go with a blend of Kentucky bluegrass and fescue, and how you actually maintain it, the turf will respond. The seed will respond to how you maintain it.
Right. Would you ever throw in, because we know ryegrass just germinate, because both of those grasses that you just mentioned, maybe they take like 3 weeks before they even germinate. So would you recommend throwing a little ryegrass in, or just patience and just keep doing it?
That's also the same as don't buy it from a box store that doesn't know anything. I personally think if you're overseeding, if you're going to spend the $50 on a bag of seed, which is a small bag, 5 kilograms, if you overseed, as long as the person is selling to you can say, hey, you're not going to see anything for, it's probably going to be a month if you're overseeding into established. It's actually going to sneak up on you. You're going to seed and you're not really going to notice anything until next spring. You're like, this is way thicker. Rye is okay, but if you're overseeding into an existing stand, I wouldn't put rye in because it's ugly.
And
it's a little hairy. It's lime green. But if you got dog piss, well, you're going to have to use rye because it germinates in a couple days, right? Yeah. You don't want to use a bluegrass to germinate dog piss areas. So
well, and you find in a lot of the big box stores, their blends are 50% rye and 50% whatever else. But that's just because ryegrass is cheap as hell. Right?
Ryegrass is cheap, but it's not. Ryegrass is not nice. It's hairy and lime green, and it's like Shrek. Well,
and that's why down in the southern states, they overseed with ryegrass, but it's not because it's prettier than the alternative. It's just they know they can turn that course around, and in 7 to 10 days, they got guys golfing on it again on green grass, right?
Yeah, and I mean, you can make rye nice. I mean, I've done it before, but you're spraying iron every 14 days. We'd go out before play, and you're spraying every 14 days. You're spraying iron. So,
well, I think that pretty much sums it up. That's about. Unless there's any last little tips or anything that you think maybe we missed.
I think we probably should recap. If people want their golf or their lawn to look like a golf course, the stuff they have to know. Because that's the common one. I want my place to look like a golf course. So they need to know that golf mows every day. Every day.
Every day.
Yeah. Rain, shine, they mow every day. There's to get the kind of turf that's on a golf course, which is bluegrass, they have to water every night. That's a part of it. The fairways are tight because they're mown short. They're mown at 3/4 of an inch usually. To mow that close, it needs to be flat. So sand is always applied to keep it flat so you can mow at 3/4 of an inch. You can't mow a residential turf at 3/4 of an inch without, it just takes specialized equipment, right? It takes real mowers. Holes. You got to make holes. So when you mow short, one of the physical properties of a turf that is allowed to be mowed short is it makes a thatch layer. It just does. So you got to punch holes in it so the water can get in. Otherwise, it's just going to sheet off. So you'd have to aerify more frequently.
See, my wife used to make fun of me, but I bought these goofy shoes.
Oh, you have those shoes?
I had to, just because we the last house we lived.
You still
in,
have goofy shoes. What are those things?
What? They're cats.
Oh, okay.
But we lived in a house that didn't have a garage, so we had to park right on the street. We didn't have a sidewalk, so every time we were loading the kids in, they would always walk on the one area right by the curb. So every spring it was dead. So I thought, we'll get our yard aerated every year, which we did. But then I said, we got to put some more holes. So I got those, and needless to say, she didn't want to sleep with me for a bit because I looked like an idiot. But we did that. We overseeded, and sure as shit, I mean, within a month, every spring it would come back pretty quick. So
you probably hit on a key point. Why was it dead in that spot?
It was just because we were constantly loading, so there was snow there, and then we were building the ice, and that grass just couldn't breathe. It just died.
That's a huge part, I think, that people miss right here. People say, we hear it all over. Salt killed my grass. Salt killed my grass. 9 times out of 10, what happens is even though it's cold and the grass is underneath, it still breathes. So, where your lawn gets packed down, whether it's somebody walking across a sports field like to catch the bus, or whether it was your kids, it gets packed down so tight that grass can't breathe, and it actually kills itself. It gasses itself.
Well, because it keeps producing CO2, but that CO2 can't go anywhere. And I mean, it's just like you. If you locked yourself in a airtight room with just CO2, I mean, eventually you're gonna fucking head's gonna explode.
So for homeowners, if you're shoveling your driveway and it's wet, just shovel it the other way or throw it further. Like, don't just push it right to the edge, because the edge will die, but it's not because of the salt, it's because it was completely asphyxiated. Right? So that's we see that all the time. The salt killed my grass. Well, there are some salts that are better than others, but for the amount of salt that gets put down, it's not the salt. It's the ice that asphyxiates it.
So in summary, long story short, cut your grass, water your grass, and feed your grass, and
it's really not that hard. Like, Mother Nature wants to grow. It's amazing. Like, grass wants to grow. You don't have to do much. Oh, one more thing. We got to talk about one more thing. People want to haul their stuff away all the time. People want to haul away clippings. This is classic. I want my lawn to be like a golf course, but I refuse to leave the clippings on the turf. Well, go look at a golf course. Go look at fairway mowers. They're returning the clippings all the time.
The problem with most homeowners, if you only mow once a week, Well, yeah, then you're taking off so much grass that it just lumps up. But if you're cutting
Bingo.
like a golf course every, at least
Yep.
every few days, then it doesn't matter. You're basically mulching it and you're feeding it yourself. And a lot of guys can get away with not a hell of a lot of fertilizer if they're doing that right.
Bingo.
Because
So-
they don't have the same traffic as a golf course.
So
either.
that's it. After
Yeah.
talking through it for whatever 15 minutes, all that stuff is all right. Everything we said is right. But if you could make one change that would make your lawn healthier, don't do your stupid shoes. That's a dumb idea.
It's
I know.
sexy though.
I know.
Very sexy.
Yeah. Anyways, that would be the one thing. Is
That'd probably be mow your grass more often
with a
and-
sharp blade.
With a sharp, yeah.
Sharpen your damn blade, mow it more often, and leave the clippings there. You'll just see a turnaround.
Perfect. Well, on that note, we'll end it. Thank you, Nelson. I think there's a lot of good info. Hopefully, a few less dumb questions you get next year. But
There's no dumb questions, but a lot of inquisitive idiots.
awesome. Okay, thank you.
See how
Hey guys, thanks for listening, and be sure to follow The Lighting Doctor on Facebook and YouTube for more amazing lawn and garden hacks.
And leave your comments and questions. We love your feedback and look forward to talking with you again real soon.
Have a great week.